There comes a moment in every person's life where the world around them changes faster than their ability to understand it. One day you feel stable, grounded, certain of who you are and where you're going. And then suddenly, a job shifts, a relationship breaks, a dream collapses, the economy twists, or life simply moves in a direction you never expected. It feels unfair. It feels personal. It feels as if life is rewriting itself without asking for your permission. You look around and feel as if the ground beneath your feet is dissolving. You try to hold on to old plans, old routines, old versions of yourself. But the world refuses to stay still. And quietly, a dangerous question begins to rise inside you. How do I rebuild my life when everything keeps changing? Sometimes you pretend you're fine. Sometimes you push forward with force. Sometimes you freeze because you don't know who you're supposed to be anymore. You wonder if you're falling behind, or if everyone else has it figured out but you. But the truth is simple. Every strong person you've ever admired has lived through this same confusion. Long before our world became chaotic, the ancient samurai faced constant uncertainty. Wars, shifting clans, collapsing systems, unpredictable futures. But they survived. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the smartest, but because they followed an ancient rule of rebuilding. Kaiou no Michi, the way of returning. A principle that teaches you how to rebuild your life from the inside out, no matter how unstable the outside world becomes. Today, you will learn this rule. And once you understand it, your life will never collapse the same way again. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, what part of your life do you want to rebuild? Your answer might help someone else who is silently struggling. And subscribe to Discipline Dojo if you want a mind that stays steady even when the world doesn't. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. When the world changes faster than you can adapt, there is a pain very few people talk about. Not heartbreak, not failure, not loneliness, but the quiet, suffocating pain of becoming a stranger to your own life. It happens slowly at first. A routine that once felt solid suddenly feels heavy. A dream that once inspired you now feels faded. A version of yourself you were proud of no longer fits. And then one day, without warning, you wake up and ask a question that shakes your core. How did my life move without me? You look around and everything feels unfamiliar. The world has changed its pace, its rules, its expectations, and somehow you feel like you didn't receive the update. Maybe technology moved too fast. Maybe relationships shifted. Maybe the person you were 5 years ago can no longer survive the demands of the present moment. And deep inside, a silent panic begins. You try to keep up, but your mind feels cluttered. You try to stay grounded, but the ground keeps changing shape beneath your feet. You try to act normal, but something inside whispers, I'm not the same person anymore. Most people never speak of this feeling. They bury it under busyness. They numb it with distractions. They pretend everything is fine because admitting the truth feels like admitting failure. But the truth is not that you're weak. The truth is that your identity is outdated, and your life is asking you to evolve. The ancient samurai knew this intimately. Entire eras shifted around them. Systems collapsed overnight. Allies turned into enemies, enemies into allies. Everything they built could disappear with a single war, a single order, a single sunrise. And yet they rarely crumbled. Why? Because they understood something we avoid facing. Change is not trying to break you. It is trying to rebuild you. The suffering comes not from the changing world, but from your refusal to let go of who you used to be. This is the first step of the ancient rule. Before you rebuild your life, you must first acknowledge the truth you've been avoiding. The world will not slow down for you, so you must learn how to move with it. Chapter 2. The Samurai Crisis, when everything you built falls apart. In the late Sengoku era, a young warrior named Riku watched his entire world collapse in a single night. The flames rose so high they swallowed the sky. The sound of steel clashing echoed like thunder. His comrades fell beside him, men he had grown up with, trained with, laughed with. And by dawn, his clan, his identity, was gone. The banners he once carried with pride lay trampled in the dirt. The teachings he memorized since childhood suddenly felt meaningless, and the future he once saw so clearly dissolved into ash. Riku wandered the mountains with nothing but a cracked sword and memories heavy enough to break a stronger man. His armor felt too big. His steps felt too slow. And every time he looked at his own reflection in the river, he whispered the same question. Who am I, now that the life I prepared for no longer exists? This is the question almost every person faces at least once. When a relationship ends, when a dream collapses, when a job disappears, when the version of you that once made sense can no longer survive the world you're standing in. People think pain comes from losing what they had. But the deepest pain comes from losing who they were. Riku walked for days, numb and directionless, until exhaustion pulled him to the steps of a quiet mountain temple. He collapsed, believing his journey was over. But in truth, it was just beginning. A monk approached him, kneeling beside his broken armor and shattered spirit. He said nothing at first, only studied the young warrior's trembling hands and hollow eyes. Then, in a voice calm enough to silence the wind, he said, "When the outer world collapses, it is only revealing the inner world you must rebuild." Riku thought he needed a new clan, a new title, a new life. But what he truly needed, and what most people need, was something far deeper. A new center, a new identity, not built on circumstances, but on inner stability. Because survival is not about holding on to who you were. It is about becoming who the next chapter requires. And that is where the ancient rule begins. Chapter 3. The ancient rule of Kaiou, returning to the true self. Kaiou. No Michi is older than any sword, older than any school of war, older even than the clans that shaped Japan. It is a principle whispered through generations, passed quietly from teacher to student, like a flame that must never die. Kaiou means to return, but not to a place, not to a home, not to the past. It means return to what cannot be taken from you. When life breaks apart, most people run outward. They chase new jobs, new relationships, new identities, believing that if they rearrange the outside, the inside will heal. But the ancients understood something we avoid. You cannot rebuild your life by trying to escape the ruins. You rebuild by returning to the part of you that survived. The monk looked at Riku's trembling hands and said, "You lost your clan, but not your courage. You lost your path, but not your ability to walk. You lost who you were, but not who you are becoming. These words were not meant to comfort him. They were meant to awaken him. Riku realized that everything he thought defined him, his armor, his rank, his clan, had been external, temporary, fragile. But deep underneath the ashes of loss, something remained untouched. His discipline, his awareness, his breath, his ability to choose his next step. The monk added quietly, "Return to what the world cannot destroy." And those words cut through him like a blade of truth. Most people rebuild the wrong way. They become addicted to reinvention, constantly trying to redesign themselves because they don't know who they truly are. They ask, "What job should I get? What role should I play? What version of me will make people accept me again?" But the samurai asked a different question. What remains when everything else is gone? That is the core of Kaiou. Your anchor is internal. Your foundation is internal. Your future strength is already inside you, buried under fear, noise, and memory, but never destroyed. Riku's rebuilding didn't start when he learned new skills. It started the moment he stopped reaching outward for answers and turned inward to reclaim the self he had forgotten. Because the world can shatter everything you built, but it can never take away the part of you that knows how to begin again. Chapter 4. Stripping away the old self that can't survive the new world. Before a samurai rebuilt his life, he performed a ritual called Suteru, the shedding. It was not symbolic. It was not poetic. It was brutally real. It meant letting go of everything that once defined him, his rank, his clan identity, his failures, his victories, his expectations, and even the dreams he once held with pride. A warrior could not step into a new era wearing the armor of the old one, because that armor, once protective, eventually becomes a cage. And this same truth quietly destroys countless modern lives. People cling to versions of themselves that no longer fit. They hold on to relationships that no longer grow. They repeat habits that no longer serve. They chase goals designed by a younger, smaller, more afraid version of who they used to be. And yet they wonder, why is my life not moving? Riku struggled with this too. He wandered the temple grounds, clutching the pieces of his shattered identity, the cracked sword, the old clan emblem, the torn cloth he once wore with pride. He believed that if he held on tightly enough, maybe life would give him back what he lost. But the monk shook his head. If you carry the ashes of who you were, your hands will never be free to build who you must become. Riku felt the weight of that truth. His past was not evil. It was simply over. And for the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't fighting the world. He was fighting the memory of his former self. This is where most people break. Not because change is impossible, but because letting go feels like a small death. The death of a dream. The death of a version of yourself you worked hard to become. The death of a path you once believed would lead you somewhere. But all rebirths require a burial. The monk guided Riku to a quiet clearing where a fire burned softly under the dawn light. He told him to place his old clan insignia into the flames, not to destroy the past, but to release his attachment to it. Riku's hands trembled. He hesitated, and the monk whispered, "The world has already changed. Now you must." When the flames consumed the last piece of his old identity, Riku did not feel empty. He felt lighter. He understood what so many people today don't. You cannot rebuild your life while protecting the ruins of your old one. This is the essence of Suteru, the shedding that makes space for the self you are meant to become. Chapter 5. Building inner stability, while the outer world shifts. Once the shedding was complete, the samurai entered the second phase, Sejaku, the practice of inner stillness. But Sejaku was not the absence of sound, not the silence of a quiet forest, not the peaceful emptiness people imagine when they think of meditation. It was something far more difficult and far more necessary, the ability to remain steady even when life refuses to be still. Riku expected the monks to teach him sword forms, new techniques, new strategies. Instead, they taught him how to breathe, how to sit in the middle of uncertainty without reaching for distraction, how to stay present even when the mind begged to run back to the past, how to remain centered when the future felt too heavy to face. The monk placed a stone in Riku's hand and said, "This is the world." Then he placed another stone on Riku's chest. "This is your mind." And then, without warning, the monk pushed lightly on Riku's shoulder. Riku stumbled, the stones shifting, almost falling. The monk whispered, "If the stone inside you moves every time the world moves, you will never find your path." Those words hit Riku harder than any blow from an enemy, because his entire life had been built on reacting to danger, to orders, to circumstances, to fear. He had never learned the art of responding from a place of inner stability. He realized something most people never understand. The world will always move. Your stability cannot depend on it. So Riku trained. He practiced breathing until his breath no longer broke under stress. He practiced observation until he could see his thoughts without becoming them. He practiced stillness until the noise of the world stopped dictating his next step. And slowly, the storms inside him began to soften. The trembling in his hands faded. His heartbeat steadied. His breath deepened. He began to feel a quiet strength rising from within, a strength he didn't know he still possessed. One morning, as the sun broke through the mist, the monk asked, "What do you feel?" Riku closed his eyes. Not certainty, not knowledge, not a plan. He felt something better. Direction. A faint direction, but one that came from inside, not outside. And the monk smiled, because this was the moment every warrior must reach, when the path no longer comes from the world, but from the self walking through it. Chapter 6. Rebuilding your life from purpose, not panic. Rebuilding is not about doing more. It is about doing what matters. Most people rebuild their lives from a place of fear. Fear of falling behind. Fear of not being enough. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of losing what little stability they have left. That fear pushes them into motion. But motion without intention is just panic disguised as productivity. Riku had lived this way for months. Every step he took after the fall of his clan was fueled by desperation. He wasn't rebuilding. He was running. Running from the silence of his own mind. Running from the memories that haunted him. Running from the truth that he didn't know who he was anymore. But when he finally developed inner stillness, the monk asked him a question that cut deeper than any sword. What life would you build if you did not fear change? Riku froze, not because he didn't understand the question, but because no one had ever asked him who he wanted to become. His entire life had been shaped by duty, expectation, and survival. He never stopped to ask what he wanted, and this is where countless people get lost today. They chase careers they don't love. They stay in relationships they've outgrown. They follow routines that drain them. They hold on to goals that were created by a younger version of themselves, all because they're rebuilding under pressure, not rebuilding from purpose. The monk guided Riku through a new ritual, Mokuteki, the clarifying of purpose. He told Riku to walk the forest alone for 3 days, carrying no weapons, no armor, no symbols of the past. Only one question. What does my spirit move toward when nothing is forcing it? In the silence of the forest, Riku realized something profound. He didn't long for status. He didn't long for power. He didn't long to reclaim his old life. He longed for mastery, for meaning, for a path that allowed him to grow, not just perform. Purpose returned to him, not as a shout, but as a whisper he could finally hear. When he came back, the monk asked, "And what did you discover?" Riku bowed deeply. "I no longer wish to rebuild the life I lost. I want to build the life I was meant to live." The monk nodded, because this is the moment every warrior must reach, when rebuilding stops being an act of survival and becomes an act of creation. Riku's life began anew that day, not because the world changed, but because his intention did. And now, the same choice sits in front of every viewer listening. Will you rebuild from panic, or will you rebuild from purpose? Chapter 7. Becoming unbreakable in a world that never stops changing. Years passed, and Riku walked down from the mountain, not as the broken warrior who had arrived there, but as a man rebuilt from the inside out. His posture was different. His breath was calm. His presence felt grounded, like a tree that had survived 1,000 storms. He carried no emblem of rank, no armor, no title. Yet people turned to look at him, not because of who he had been, but because of who he had become. The monk's teachings lived in every step he took. When the world shifts, do not cling. When the past calls, do not return. When fear whispers, do not obey. Riku learned that the world does not promise stability. It does not promise certainty. It does not promise fairness. But it does offer one thing: endless opportunities to become someone who cannot be shaken. And that is what he embodied. One evening, Riku visited a village that had once known him as a young, impulsive warrior. They remembered the boy who chased validation, who feared failure, who measured his worth by the approval of others. When they saw him now, they felt something different: a quiet strength, a clarity, a presence that made others feel calmer, simply by standing near him. A young villager approached and asked, "What changed you?" Riku smiled gently. "The world kept changing, so I learned how to change with myself." He explained what most people never realize. You don't become unbreakable by controlling life. You become unbreakable by controlling the self that meets life. Storms will come. Plans will collapse. People will leave. Circumstances will shift in ways you never predict. But if your identity is rooted in the unchanging part of you, your discipline, your awareness, your purpose, then nothing outside has the power to destroy you. This was the final lesson of Kaiou. Rebuilding is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong relationship with change. As Riku continued his journey, he understood what the monk had prepared him for. A world that never stops changing requires a man who never stops returning to himself. And the viewers listening now, the ones who feel lost, overwhelmed, uncertain, are standing at the exact same threshold Riku once stood upon. Your old life may have fallen apart. Your plans may have collapsed. Your path may be invisible. But you are not finished. You are beginning. Because becoming unbreakable isn't about never struggling. It is about knowing exactly how to rebuild every single time the world asks you to. Before this year ends, you have a choice. Enter the next year as the same person who struggled, or enter it as the person who rebuilt themselves with awareness, intention, and courage. So here is your 7-day Kaiou Rebuild Challenge. The same path Riku walked, adapted for your life. Day 1. Write down what life has taken from you this year. Day 2. Write down what life could not take from you. Day 3. Let go of one old identity, belief, or expectation that no longer serves you. Day 4. Practice 5 minutes of Sejaku. Sit, breathe, and stay present without running from your thoughts. Day 5. Catch one fear-based decision and break the pattern. Day 6. Define a clear purpose for who you want to be in the coming year. Day 7. Take one action, small or large, that aligns with that new purpose. When you're done, comment, "I begin my rebuilding today." Your comment is not just engagement. It is a declaration of the person you will become before the new year even arrives. And if you want a mind that stays strong when the world shifts in 2026, then subscribe to Discipline Dojo. This is your path now, and you don't have to walk it alone.